Welcome to the Deconstructed Woman podcast, a podcast about breaking down barriers between women, exploring and sharing perspectives of each individual woman's experience, and discovering what we have in common and what makes us different. Hosted by Elisa Marie and Joji.
Welcome back to another episode of The Deconstructed Woman. Today I have Sarah, who's co-hosted with me before, as well as one of her invited guests, Alyssa. And this is someone that Sarah knows pretty well. And I think today we're going to embark on a very interesting conversation about how you can find balance with competing priorities in your life as a woman when you have a career that you love, as well as a family that you adore and want to make a priority in your life, and what maybe the underpinning of that could be, whether it's faith, as it is in Allison's case, or something else that might be also involved. So I am going to introduce Allison, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about her background, about her career, some things that led to that decision in her career, and also how her family and her faith play into that. So Allison, I'm going to turn it over to you. Please feel free to share with us how you'd like to give us some details about your background.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Joji, and Sarah. Thank you for the connection and the opportunity. Just to give a little background, I'm a dental hygienist. I have been since 2012 when I graduated at the age of 23 years old. I also am a mom to my sweet boy, Austin, who's 10, and my husband. We've been married. This Friday will be 11 years that we've been married. Just very fortunate, very blessed to have my boys and my career. Very thankful. My career choice and how I don't know how in my 18-year-old brain at the time, I chose a career that I wanted to be able to be a part-time working mom. I knew that, I think going back to what led me down the road, my family are immigrants. They're from Greece, and I had grandparents that didn't even graduate from elementary school because of the war, and they just didn't have those opportunities. So they came to this country penniless, and when they were raising their children, it was like college was the option. You couldn't take over the family business that they had started when they came here. And my grandfather decided to become a doctor, and he almost created this legacy in our family. I've got quite a few doctors, dentists that were in the medical field. The reason why that's important to mention is because it did give me the backdrop for what led me into the medical field. And when I was growing up, my mom always used to say, you need to go in the medical field. That's where the job stability is. That's where there's always going to be a need. And so when I was developing what I wanted to formulate about what I wanted to do as I was broaching college, I wasn't very studious. I knew that was a weak point for me. I'm like, okay, what can I choose that's going to fit the bill and check the boxes of getting me into the medical field? I know I don't want to spend the amount of time that a doctor has to go through to get through med school. And I started just shadowing different things in the medical field. And eventually I landed on dental hygiene. And I'm like, okay, this checks the boxes. I love working with people. This is going to get me into the medical field. And I don't have to go to school for that long of time. I can come out being able to support myself if I ever need to be just on my own. I loved the flexibility. And that was really what led me onto the journey. And somehow, like I said, in my 18-year-old brain, I had the foresight to say, this is going to be great as a working mom. That was what led me into dental hygiene.
I have a question for you, Allison.
Yes. Yeah.
Did you know from a young age that you wanted to be a mom and that having children was something that was a big part of your future life?
It's so funny that you asked me that because no, I didn't. I did not feel, I questioned many times if I wanted children. I don't know why. No, it was not. But obviously, I'm a woman and I knew it was going to be a possibility for me. No, actually, my dreams I always thought about was being a doctor as a kid. I always thought about being a pediatrician. Those were my dreams as a child. And
Yeah.
actually, still to this day, I wish that you find out things later on in life. I was a lot smarter than I gave myself credit for, and I could have made it through med school.
I wanted to ask Sarah, because I guess I want to say it's awe-inspiring listening to you, because when I was in high school, I didn't even know what I wanted to do, let alone the fact that children didn't even enter into the picture. And so I guess for me, I was just stressing myself out trying to figure out, like, I knew I would go to college because that was expected of me. I went to a liberal arts college just knowing that I had some more time to figure out what I was going to do. My parents expected me to be a physician as well. So I was pre med getting into college, but everything else was just a wait and see. Sarah, what was it like for you?
I was gonna say, Joji, me and you have very similar paths. I applaud you, Allison, for knowing right away. I did not know. I knew I was gonna go to college, but
Mhm.
career-wise, whether I wanted to be a mother, those things honestly did not cross my mind. It kind of just unfolded. I did know though that the medical field was something of interest of me to me, partly because I come from a family of healthcare workers. Like my
Mhm.
uncle is a cardiac thoracic surgeon, my aunt's a PA, my other aunt's a pharmacist. So it kind of runs in our blood. But specific career wise, I did not know it. But I knew I was going to go to college for sure.
It's funny, all three of us are immigrants. So I also am an immigrant. I immigrated here with my parents when I was 6. And so I think there definitely is. I think the listeners are going to get this bias from immigrants whose families want them to go into healthcare and to go to college. And there's some, I don't know, like security. If you go into healthcare, you'll always have a job. I think a
Yeah.
lot of immigrants do feel that way. And for all three of us, we ended up being in some aspect of healthcare, which I find probably not very surprising, but at the same
Yes, yeah.
time, it's okay. It's a pretty legitimate way, the way that immigrants feel like if you can make it into healthcare, you've got a leg up on a lot of different areas.
Sure.
And congratulations, Allison, on your upcoming 11-year anniversary. That
Oh,
is,
thank you.
yeah, it's a lot of work to be a working mom as well as to have a happy and fulfilling marriage as well. And tell me more about your family life and sort of the intersection between your family life, your faith, and your career. Like, how do they all three of those? How do you keep that balance going?
I think to address the faith aspect, I'm a Christian and I really try to apply the principles of what God tells me how to be a wife and a mother, to serve my husband, to serve my son. As I raise my son, I really try to instill principles with my son. I'm a big believer in disciplined children, meaning I want him to be respectful. As I'm giving him advice, everything that I'm giving through the interweavings of my parenting style is always I'm trying to teach my son how to be moral, being truthful in what he does, serving other people, and trying to think of other people. So I really try to weave that in as I'm guiding my child. With my husband, marriage takes a lot of work, and I think executing forgiveness. These are the principles that I try to apply to my husband. Maybe sometimes it really is difficult to forgive when you're having a disagreement or your spouse has done something to hurt you, but I've just found a lot of fruit in applying those principles to my marriage and my parenting to really build my home to be a very loving environment. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of where I wanna go from there. Now creating work-life balance, that's tricky because I really do love being a homemaker. I love keeping my home clean. I love serving hot meals to my boys. So it can be tricky. There's a lot of planning on the front end. I sit down on Sundays and I plan out my entire week. If I don't plan things accordingly, then I can't keep my home a well-oiled machine. And there's times where, thankfully, I'm very fortunate enough. My husband, he picks up the slack wherever I need it. So I work 2 jobs. I practice clinically dental hygiene 3 days a week, but then I also work as a trainer and lecturer for another dental tech-based company. And so on the weeks that I'm traveling, my husband, we communicate and he steps right in. He's Mr. Mom. He's doing the dishes, he's doing the laundry. So I have the support system that I need to make it happen at home. But when I look at what it took for us to get to this place to where we are now, to being this well-oiled machine, it took a lot of executing my faith-based principles in my home at the foundation of it all.
And I hope you don't mind me saying, and no disrespect, when you originally used the word serve your husband and your son, I
Yes.
thought to myself, boy, she must be really a very traditionally minded woman. And yet you have a very modern work and family dynamic. You will travel for work, your husband picks up the slack and he fills in when you're not at home. So it's a very modern, non-traditional kind of situation that you have, which is obviously working for you and your husband and your son. And that I appreciate hearing that, because at first I was, oh, how similar are Allison and I, just based on hearing that word. But it
Mhm.
sounds like maybe your ideals are maybe traditional, but you found a way for that to fit into the non-traditional lifestyle you all have.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I like that. I like that. Thank you. Thank you very much. I really feel that's a high compliment because servanthood looks different for everybody. Maybe it's just, my husband, needs something from the store and he's not in the mood to go getting it. Okay. Then I'm going to go get it for him. Right. Okay. I don't know if that was a great example, but it happens in many different facets and different ways of doing it to where it's honestly, it's a joy. Thinking about it and talking about it makes me light up because it really truly is a joy for me to do these things for my husband, maybe when he doesn't have the energy. So it looks all different shapes and sizes, and he does it in return the same way. And my husband, I bless his heart, he's so much more detail oriented when it comes to serving each other in the home because if he's got to fold my laundry, he tries to do it exactly how he thinks I want it, right? So that's servanthood. It happens in many different shapes and sizes, right? But I could see how you would think the traditional way of servanthood, that could have been a little off-putting, but I could understand how you would have taken it that way in the first place.
Well, I think our listeners also need to appreciate the fact that all three of us being very ethnically connected to where our family of origin, and me as being not born in this country originated from, being taking care of our families is a prime responsibility of the way that we were raised. I know Greek families are known to be very traditional. Indian families, I'm from India, Indian families are very traditional. Sarah is Middle Eastern. And so all three of our cultures and way the women are raised, being taking care of our families is a primary way that we identify with love and the way that we show our culture and our family, and also respect to the way we were raised. And so I try to keep it in balance. And one of the things that Sarah and I talk about is being bicultural and how we have one foot in each country, in each world. And the fact that I've been here so long because I'm 56. So I've been in the US for 50 years. Yes. And so
Wow.
though my family is very traditional and we all have different varying amounts of that, I've also been raised in the US for 50 years. And now that's my majority culture. I'm also married to a non-Indian, and transitioning and understanding sort of what that being able to find a way to comfortably live my life, because I think that idea of being a serving mother or child wife to a non-Indian is also somewhat, I think, a little bit uncomfortable for him. And so it's finding your audience and trying to figure out how to navigate some things. Though, even if I will say, if I go to one of my older aunts and uncles' houses and my husband and I are together, there's a certain expectation that I will care for my husband, serving him food and stuff like that. That's part of my role. And I do enjoy doing that. I do that in in my own house because,
Mhm.
like you, Allison, I get pleasure from doing that, right? I like to take care of my husband, and I don't think he understands that as serving him. But like you said, serving your spouse and your family takes many different shapes and forms. And so trying to take the burden off your spouse is a way to show them how much you love them. Doesn't mean that you're in servitude to that individual, right? So there's different
Exactly.
degrees. And Sarah, you've been very quiet. What are your thoughts about this whole discussion?
My thoughts are I definitely I guess the wording is I agree with what you're both saying. I too love to serve my husband, and it does take in many shapes and forms. Just as an example, before this call, I was at Macy's and my husband was like, "Oh my God, if you're at Macy's, can you please get me this?" So even just that small act, just to relieve his burden from work, just made me so happy. And it's like so simple, but I think it goes so far. One thing though that did strike me, Allison, is I wanted to ask you, and of course the question applies to you, Joji, as well, is, with your job, with your husband, with your family, how do you find time just for you and him? Like, do you go on date nights? Do you prioritize that? Or is it more just focusing on your family as a unit?
make time for each other. My husband, he's fortunate in that he gets a good sizable amount of vacation time at work. Oftentimes what we'll do is he'll take a day off during the week, and then we drop our son off at school, and then we just get lost spending the day together. Prior to my son being in elementary school age, we would once a month, like when he was a baby, toddler, I would always schedule our date nights. And so our son would go off with the grandparents, and then my husband and I would go out on a date. And I will say, comically, some of our, of course, in the early years of our marriage, some of those date nights were spent barking at each other, like we're getting into disagreements. But when I look back on it, I'm like, you know what? We might have been arguing, but we were arguing alone together where we made time for each other. And it just, it like, when I go back and I think about it, it makes me laugh because yeah, those were the early years of the marriage. I don't know what it is, and you women may have experienced this as well, but year 3 was just a tough year. I don't know why. It was just like maybe the newness and the joy of being married wore off, and the reality of, oh my gosh, we have bills to pay. We have this responsibility. We're raising a child. It was just like finding our groove was so hard, but like we still always made time for each other, and we still do. And my husband, if I were to pull him up here right now, he would tell you I call everything a date. If my son is like upstairs hanging out in his room and my husband and I are sipping a cup of coffee, I'm like, we're having a coffee date, honey.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah. I think looking back at my life, given the fact that I'm definitely an empty nester, my daughter's out on her own and things like that, I cannot underscore how important it is for couples to have date night. And so, Sarah, I know that you have a young child at home, and it is very important. And it takes me back to before I got married. I'm divorced and remarried, but when I first got married, we had to go through some pre-Kana classes in the Catholic faith. And so I remember that when you learn about it, they teach you that your relationship with God comes first, and then your husband, and then your child, right? And your children. And I think that was something that got very lost in my first marriage. And the reason why I say that is because culturally, even though we had a baby and a young child, and my husband's family was in Illinois, we lived about an hour apart. And it was really looked down upon that we would get a babysitter to watch our child while he and I might go out to dinner. And so
Right.
we never took advantage of that. Because it just felt, and we were new parents and we didn't know exactly how to handle that. And so we didn't rely on his family, and my family lives out of state. And so I will say that I do feel like that was something that could have made us a little bit stronger, because for those listeners who don't have children, I want to share that having a baby creates so much stress in your marriage that
Mhm.
although it is a joyful experience and it's a beautiful journey for you and your partner, it's still very stressful. Not only are you adjusting to potentially a new relationship, a new marriage, a new mortgage, then you also have a new baby, and you're trying to figure out your role as a woman. You might be nursing, you're getting used to your body. And there are just so many moving pieces that if you don't carve out time for you and your partner to spend time together, it really takes a toll on your marriage and your relationship. And so I cannot underscore how important that is, because you do need to see each other as a partnership and as a couple, in addition to being a new mom and a new dad, because otherwise that couple relationship really suffers. I don't know if either one of you agree or disagree with me, but I would love your thoughts.
I 1,000% agree. You
Yeah.
have to take a moment to as much as you don't want to leave your young child, you have to be able to do it. Take them to grandparents, take them to whoever, whatever is acceptable in the culture, and get out with your husband, because I realized that when I went out with him, at the beginning, it's almost like we forgot what it was like before having a child. So you really want to revisit that and remember like why you even married this person in the first place, and kind of bond over that, and just talk about what's been on your mind but you haven't had time to talk about because of your child or because of work. So I do think it nourishes it and it strengthens the relationship. And when it comes to kids, you're right, Joji, as it can, unfortunately, having a child can actually be taxing on your relationship. So it's all the more reason why going on a date night is healthy, especially after having a child, believe it or not.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's important for your children to see you bonding together. I think it creates a more loving and stable environment even for them. to know that my mom and dad are happy, they're getting along, you're displaying an example of what a healthy relationship looks like so that when they're choosing their spouse one day, they're going to be looking for something that hopefully models after what was displayed for them at home.
Yep. And I also think there's also this idea. I have an only child. It sounds like Allison, you have a son who's 11 years old. And
Yes.
so I think there's also, I used to be a therapist before I went into business. And so there's also this idea of triangulation, which is that when you only have a single child and both of you may be thinking of having more children, but in the current scenario, you have this triangle and it's very important to keep the balance between the two adults and this child. And I think that a lot of marital dysfunction happens when you have a child. If you put too much importance on the child, it throws off the balance between the two adults. And so it's also a very fine line. It gives your child security to know mom and dad are on the same page or mom and mom are on the same page, however that looks like. But at the same time, to know that there is a very fine balance in the relationship between all three. And I think kids will test parents and try to split them when they
Oh,
can.
yeah.
And that's just natural. That's just human nature. It's nothing against your child. It's just the way it is. And so your mom and dad really need to know where each other stands and to know when their kids might be trying to play one against the other. And it doesn't make them a devious person. It just makes them a normal child who's trying to test their parents. And so I do feel like it's important that you are a mom and dad or the parental unit is a unified group because that shuts down any inappropriateness with kids trying to pull something over on one or the other. And so I think I'm glad we all agree and we all have that experience. And Sarah, you have the youngest child, so I guess you'll figure that out as time goes by.
I'm trying. Yep, it's tough, but we do make it work though.
And yeah, absolutely. And I know the other thing, Allison, that Sarah shared about your commitment to your working was mentoring new hygienists. And how do you fit that into your overall love for your career?
It that looks very multifaceted for me because I get the opportunity when I do get the opportunity to mentor incoming hygienists into the field one-on-one, I welcomely take that opportunity. I'll come in on off time when they have families sitting in the chair, or we'll pull other office staff that we work with and I get them in the chair and I'll hone in on what their weak points are with their clinical skills or their verbal skills or whatever it may be. So I love those one-on-one opportunities because I just feel it's the tour. I've been so fortunate to have mentorship from just some really amazing hygienists across the country. And I love being able to give back that gift to the next generation coming in. But I mentioned that I work a second job for a dental tech company. So what I do is when offices adapt this specific piece of technology, I go in and I train the hygiene staff as a whole in the department. I also get to, while it's more of a niche based training, it still is an opportunity to really show them something that could change and pivot the way that they practice on a day-to-day basis. And if you know anything about dental hygiene, we have a really high cumulative trauma disorder rate because it's a very taxing body on our profession physically. So when I get the opportunity to bring this technology, I also try to bring other things that can help enhance their practice to help alleviate their aches and pains, or just anything to try to bring the joy back into their careers. And then just as of the last year, I've also had the platform to start lecturing to larger audiences. And that's been really fun too. So it's almost like the mentorship has come in all different shapes and sizes for me. And the opportunities have quite honestly just come my way. And so as they come my way, I just take it and run with it. And it's a little scary, especially when you're giving a lecture to 100 people for the first time. And I'm not public speaking. That wasn't exactly a part of my background, but I just find I just try to have courage in those situations because I try to keep the big picture in mind is this is my way of giving back to my field. And that's been really fun and really fulfilling. So I'm excited to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, and I will say that I feel like you are at this point in your like an inflection point in your child rearing where you're also you may not see it, but I can see it for you that sort of that period of time where you're going to launch your son to go to college if that's what he chooses to do is right around the corner. And so getting into these different opportunities to lecture and to be able to teach is also positioning you really well for a time where empty nest may not be that uncomfortable for you, because now you're going to fulfill that, rearing a sort of love in a different way, and that you're going to teach larger groups of people and share your passion for your career with a different, in a different method. And so it's really exciting to be able to continue assuming more responsibility and touching more lives. And that's how this podcast was born for me. And so I feel like it's really wonderful to be open and see the opportunities as they come up and be able to flourish in the different environments that you find yourself in. And maybe not all of them are a good fit for you, but you won't know until you try it, right? And so that's why it's so wonderful to give it a chance. Don't let fear stop you, and then figure out where, maybe where it'll take you to the next step and the next step after that. So it's really quite wonderful. Is there anything that the two of you, before we close out, believe it or not, we're at 30 minutes almost. So I just wanted to wrap this up, but I'm open to any conversations you guys might have as we think about this really interesting conversation about finding the balance and how challenging and yet rewarding it can be for all of our listeners as we all aspire to find this balance.
I think I would just kind of close with what I'm noticing from you, Allison, is a lot of the reason why you're able to flourish to me is because your foundation and your faith is so strong. And that is just kind of like branching out in different forms. So what it sounds like to me is people need to have a generally good foundation, a good mentality, and then things just kind of happen in their own way. And that's usually a very good thing. That's what I'm noticing.
That just makes my heart soar, because if that's, I will tell you, if there's anything I would love my life to reflect, is that I'm such a strong believer that when I put God into all these facets of my life, that's like the lifeblood that flows through everything for me. And I think is such the key ingredient to success for me in my life. So the fact that was your big takeaway, like that's the cry of my heart. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah.
You're very inspirational.
Oh, thank you.
Well,
So are you. Both of you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
ladies, for taking the time with me today on the Deconstructed Woman. And I just want to share with our listeners that if they have feedback for this conversation, you can always reach out to us through the Deconstructed Woman Facebook page, or reach out to us on the Spotify platform, which is where you get your podcast from. But I want to thank Allison for taking the time today to share her wonderful family story and her faith story, as well as Sarah, who recommended Allison to me as a wonderful person to bring into the Deconstructed Woman. So I want to thank both of you again. And Allison, feel free to join us anytime in the future. I'd love to hear from you again. And Sarah, of course, you and I will chat again soon. Thank you both.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, The Deconstructed Woman. If you liked this podcast, please share it with your friends, rate this episode, or subscribe to be notified of all new content. We want to hear from you, our listener. Do you have thoughts on the discussions we're having? Want to share topic suggestions, or want to join us for a topic that you're passionate about? Contact us at our email address, thedeconstructedwoman@gmail.com.